The Second World War is famous for its aerial warfare. In the powder blue skies of North Africa, the German pilots of 77th Fighter Group went toe-to-toe with British and American pilots, with notable successes for over 2 years. But while Germans, like Werner Schroer, had won fame in these skies, the outnumbered Germans were eventually overwhelmed and put on the back foot. By May of 1943, Rommel's Afrika Korps were all but defeated, and the 77th Fighter Group, now under the command of the famous ace Johannes Steinhoff, were forced to retreat all the way to the tip of Tunisia. Cornered in Cape Bon, the group faced annihilation or capture if they could not find a way to get off the continent. Their desperation would lead to a remarkable display of improvisation and bravery against all odds. Under swaying palm trees, among scattered tents, German Lieutenant Merkel plays an assortment of pieces on a grand piano every evening. Nobody asks where the piano came from. In war, such mysteries aren't important. At the 11th hour, Steinhoff and his men had more pressing concerns. They had received permission to evacuate the continent, but not the transport aircraft to do so. With only Bf-109 fighters available, hundreds of ground crew would surely be left behind. The 109 fighters were single-seat aircraft. Slim and streamlined, there was simply no obvious way they could be used as transport. But necessity is the mother of invention. Through trial and error, it was discovered that 2 additional men could be loaded into a 109. First, the armor plate behind the pilot was removed. Second, the pilot's tiny baggage space cut away from the aft section. And finally, the wireless hatch widened with cutters. It wasn't exactly going to be a comfortable ride. The additional passengers were crammed in feet first and barefoot. Such acrobatic boarding procedures elicited laughter from the men as limbs squeezed into tiny spaces never intended for men to be. For the crew member in the pitch-black aft section, there wasn't much to laugh about. With no parachute or life jacket, it was all or nothing. But the men were desperate to avoid capture, and so this bizarre and very dangerous airlift was given the go-ahead by Steinhoff. After destroying all the equipment they couldn't take with them, mostly vehicles, broken aircraft, and spare parts, the crews loaded each 109 with its additional passengers and the evacuation began. Their target was an airfield at Trapani on the island of Sicily, still under Axis controls for the time being. The skies around Cape Bon were controlled by the Allies. Spitfires and Kitty Hawks prowled the coast, hunting fleeting Germans. The first wave of 109s took off in the evening, flying low at treetop height to try and avoid detection. It was a false hope. The Allied fighters swooped in to intercept the Germans. Dangerously unbalanced by the weight of the extra crewmen, the 109s were difficult to maneuver and sluggish on the stick. The German formation broke into a panic as radios barked frantic instructions. The sky filled with smoke and fire, pilots swerving and banking any which way they could. The serenity of the ocean shattered by roar of cannon and twisted metal. Steinhoff and his pilots did their best to evade their hunters, but they were easy targets, and several were shot down over the sea in quick succession. Nevertheless, the evacuation had to continue. Follow-up waves began running the same gauntlet of fire. Sergeant Reinhold decided he wasn't going to be a sitting duck, and took the fight to the Allies, dogfighting several over the sea, and remarkably managing to shoot down a Kitty Hawk. His passengers were grateful for his bravery, despite the disorientating ride. I swear, it was like being tossed about in a tumble dryer, one bruised mechanic recalled. Despite the losses, most of the 77th Fighter Group made it to Trapani. The ordeal was a foreshadow of worse to come for the Germans, but for now, they counted their blessings. In the weeks to follow, news of the evacuation spread. Hundreds of Germans had been saved by the airlift, which became affectionately known among the Germans as the poor man's Lufthansa.